Happy Thursday, everyone. This is Sheila from Grace Methodist of the Metroplex. And on Sunday, we had a special day. It was United Methodist Women's Sunday. And our speaker was the lovely Miss Erica Fadell. And thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And you gave an awesome speech on, I won't say speech, it was, a word. You gave an awesome word on Sunday. And you spoke from Numbers, starting at 27, verse 1 through 7.
Yes.
Okay, so claim your inheritance. That was very strong. So just give us, let us know what you spoke about on Sunday.
Sure. Well, on Sunday, the message, as Ms. Sheila has mentioned, was claim your inheritance, and it was taken from Numbers 27, verses 1 through 7, when Zelophehad's daughters went to Moses and the priest and the assembly to claim what was theirs. Their father had died without any sons, and the Israelites were about to enter into the promised land, and they were about to divide up the lands, and the sisters wanted to make sure that even though their father had no sons, that his name would continue and that they would be allowed to claim the land and then thereby claim their inheritance.
Right. I mean, that was something I didn't know. I mean, that it goes way back, because if you think about what we're going through today, women's rights, and we're still trying to actually to be in the pulpit.
Mm-hmm. In some places, yeah.
Right, exactly. So how do you feel about that when you compare to like somebody, the 5 daughters, they made steps for us, but yet we still have a long ways to go?
Well, I believe that God has a plan, and that God's plan will be worked out, and that we, as God's people, as God's children, need to step out on the promises of God and recognize that we are playing a part as well, that God is working things out, but God is working things out as God, and God is working things out through us. And so that we need to be advocates for one another and advocates for change, so that women are allowed to have the full equality that is their God-given right, and that they are able to claim their inheritance in God and in the laws of our society, that they take their space and take their place.
Yes, absolutely. So I mean, it was like a strong word that you really gave us on Sunday. I mean, that just really made you think how things are it's so different, men versus women. But, today we have women just stepping up, like say, with God's inheritance. You had the 3 points. Well, we need to know, who we are.
Yes. Yes, the 3 points were we need to know who we are, we need to know what our inheritance is, and when we have those things, then we can live in the fullness of God.
Absolutely. So can you just give a scenario, or, just let us know about each one? Touch on each one.
Sure. So in knowing who we are, I think the point is that sometimes while we call ourselves children of God, we don't claim that fully, and we don't step out in authority on what it means to be a child of God. God has given us dominion over the earth. God created us in God's image, and God invites us to have access to the power that God has given us through claiming us as His own, that God loves us so much, and that we need to step out and recognize God's love for us and use that as a critical identification mark, that we are children of God, and that when we know who we are, then we can have the power and authority to then move forward and claim our inheritance. And in claiming our inheritance, essentially what I was talking about was our earthly spiritual inheritance and our heavenly spiritual inheritance. And so on our earthly inheritance, of course, God has promised us that God will give us an abundant life. And an abundant life means that we live a life in freedom, and we live a life without fear and anxiety, and that we live a life of peace, and we live a life of joy, and that is what we can have here on earth when we know who we are and we claim our inheritance. And then, of course, God gives us the heavenly inheritance that heaven is our home. And so in the
Yes.
hereafter, we have that promise that we will be with God, be with Christ after death. And then finally, when we know who we are and we claim our inheritance, then we can truly see the fruit of the blessings of God, and we can see the outpouring of the promises of God, and we can live in the fullness of life that God would have for us.
Right. And I just really loved when you talked about fear, that we can't live in fear. God didn't give us
A spirit of fear.
No. Absolutely
And I
not.
think
Yeah.
there's so much going on in our world today, and I wish that this is one point that I had written down, but I didn't say it in the time when I was in the pulpit. But there's so much going on in our world today that
Yes.
inspires us to be afraid, right?
Right.
That causes us to have anxiety, that causes us to worry. And as a mom, I mean, of course, we're looking at the pandemic and all that's been poured out as a result of the pandemic, all of the consequences, ramifications. But then in my own life as a mom, I have 3 teenagers, and when you have kids,
Yes.
there's a lot to worry about.
Right. Yes.
You could drive yourself crazy with worry. And I constantly have to remind myself that I need to give it to God.
Exactly.
That God is in control, and that
Yes.
whatever happens, that God is in control, and that God will give me what I need to face the living of these days and to be the mother
Yes.
that my children need. And I strive to do that every day. And so in our daily lives, there are so many things that pull us away from the fullness of God, that drag us down, that keep us bound. And this message was just a reminder that we don't have to live like that.
Right. We just step out on faith.
Yes, yes, and it's
With
not
God,
easy. It's not easy,
right.
but it is a challenge. But that is what God invites us to do every day, is to
Right.
step out on faith.
Exactly, because he said, just knock and the door will be open.
Right.
He will protect us.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you wanted to say? I mean, that you really need to go back and listen to Sunday's service, because Erica, she did an awesome, awesome job. Her word was very strong. We needed that. Definitely needed that.
Well, thank you. I'm just humbled, and I ask that sincerely, that God would use me as God's instrument. And I'm always just in awe of God when God allows the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart to meet the spirits of those who are in the congregation, and that they receive a message from
Right.
God. So I'm just humbled and
Yeah.
thankful that God brought our hearts and minds together in the moment that we were together.
You definitely made us think. Absolutely. Because we don't think as these 5 daughters, these 5 women, they actually just were stepping stones.
Right. And as I said in my sermon, they changed the game.
Yes, absolutely. You didn't know that, huh? And that was from Numbers. Okay, so thank you again. Thank you. I tell you, you're so full of passion. You're such a quiet person in church, but you're so full of passion, so full of God. We know we can feel your spirit.
Oh,
So thank you.
God bless.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate it. So again, so join us. We're here on the campus of Texas Wesleyan University at 1310 College Street in Fort Worth. Okay, we're Grace Methodist of the Metroplex. Okay, so make sure you join us. Okay, and be blessed and have a fantastic week. And always remember to experience grace.